This is a 20-year-old aluminum PowerBook, and it doesn't know it yet, but today is its lucky day. Because I bought this thing on eBay for just about 50 bucks. And as you would expect for a 20-year-old computer bought for just $50, it's a little rough around the edges. The front latch is pretty battered and doesn't really work properly. The shift key is missing, and there's a myriad of scuffs, scratches, and dents around the casing. But what this PowerBook doesn't know yet is that I was recently browsing through eBay, as I am known to do, and I came across a seller who was offering brand new OEM parts for these PowerBooks. And as I was browsing through these listings, I started to wonder, hey, wait a minute, there's enough here that we could build a new PowerBook. And so that's exactly what we're going to do today. Let's refurbish this 20-year-old PowerBook. We're gonna keep the internal components, the logic board, the screws, the Wi-Fi cards, the RAM, stuff like that. But I have a completely brand new enclosure right here. We have a display bezel. There's a hinge cover for the display itself. We have the rear cover. When do you see something like this? New keyboard. I even have the RAM access door that's also brand new, because why not? I'm extremely excited to get into this video, so let's get this machine opened up right after a word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Basis and their new 7-in-1 docking station. This thing offers the best value in a USB-C hub, the main feature HDMI supporting 4K at 60 Hz. And at just $15.99, it is the only product in this tier that has that feature. Plus, sporting 3 USB-A ports, an SD and micro SD card slot, and a 100-watt USB-C pass-through charging. The 7-in-1 hub is also unique in its sleek metal design. It even won the Red Dot Design Award for its clean looks, and it has convenient features such as a place to tuck the USB-C cable for easy transportation. Plus, thanks to USB-C, you can use it with the new iPhone 15 series for data transfer from USB and SD cards. And thanks to that 100-watt charging pass-through, you can very easily turn your desk into a full-on workstation. It works on macOS, Windows, and Linux, bringing convenience to all your devices. And at this price, you will not find anything with the feature set, versatility, and build quality that Basis offers. So if you want to learn more, check out the link in the description below. A big thanks to Basis for sponsoring. Now let's get back to the video. Now, I know what you might be thinking at this point. Luke, how do you know that these parts are actually brand new? Well, that's a great question, and one piece of evidence to back it up is the boxes they came in. The seller put these USPS labels on top of what appeared to be the original shipping labels from these parts way back when they were brand new. So with that evidence, let's get started on the teardown. Now, accessing the internals of these PowerBooks is not a simple task. There's a lot of screws in any Apple laptop that is before the unibody design. So there's a bunch of screws around the outside. We have to take the battery out. We have to take off the RAM access door. And then there's 4 screws along the rear of the bottom case, 2 additional ones in the battery compartment itself, 4 screws along the back of the device near the hinge, and then finally 2 more screws on top of the keyboard assembly. So with those 800 million screws taken out, we can now lift the keyboard assembly up from the rest of the machine, and we'll disconnect the trackpad and the keyboard ribbon cable. Now, the first thing that we're going to do here is rebuild our display. So let's take it off. First, you have to fish the Bluetooth connector board that's just kind of hanging out in here by the battery compartment. We'll disconnect that white connector there. Then we'll lift up the airport ribbon connector, which exposes the airport antenna cable, and we'll unplug the display inverter from the logic board. Then we'll disconnect the display data cable, and we are ready to take the display off. This one is a pretty easy job, just 4 T8 Torx screws, and it'll pull straight up out of the bottom case. So our next step is going to be transferring our LCD over to our rebuilt housing. Now, this isn't something that you could do nowadays when Apple laminates everything together with adhesive, but fortunately these old PowerBooks are not the same. There's two T6 Torx screws on the bottom of the display assembly, and with those out of the way, you can grab a spudger and insert that into the gap between the plastic rubber gasket and the front display bezel. Now, this is not an easy task as the clips that hold this together are very strong. But essentially, you just work your way around with a pick and eventually the whole thing just pops right out. Now, we do have to be careful of the antennas which are stored in that housing. So with the display taken out, we'll rotate it away from the LCD panel to gain access to the components in the hinge. And now we can start to free the LCD panel and the internal components. We'll disconnect the antenna board, remove the inverter, and unscrew the LCD from its mounting points to the front bezel. Next, we'll take off the clutch cover, remove the cables and the hinge mounts from the old bezel, and now it's time to transfer everything over to our brand new component and rebuild our display assembly. So there's the old display housing, as you can see, scratched up, beat up, but here's our brand new one. Look at that. You don't see stuff like this 20 years down the road. This is already a very exciting project. So now we got to move on to the logic board. Removing the logic board is a pretty standard affair. We have a bunch of screws and connectors that all need to come out before the logic board will lift out of place. And that reveals a fun little quirk of this old PowerBook, and that is that the fan and heatsink assembly is actually attached to the bottom case, not the logic board. So when we remove it, we have to change the thermal paste. So we'll clean that off and then unscrew the heatsink assembly. Okay, so now we get to a part of the video that I have been really looking forward to, and that's where we get to use our brand new bottom case. I mean, the thing is just so perfect, and I'm so excited. But basically what we're gonna do now is transfer over the components like the hard drive, the super drive, even the little battery connector and speakers and wires, all of the tiny little things that are inside of this case have to get moved over, and then we can start to reassemble. This process honestly gave me a little bit of appreciation for the way that modern MacBooks are built. Obviously, they're not nearly as repairable or as upgradable as an older machine like this, but internally they are so much more simple. There are so many wires and connectors and things screwed into other things. It is honestly a mess. So this took me a lot longer than I initially thought. So it was at this point that I ran into a bit of a hiccup with this repair, and that was that the brand new parts that I ordered were actually from a slightly newer model of PowerBook, and that means that some of the connectors on the logic board are a little different or are in a different location. So I went on eBay and I found the newer logic board that I need for about $35, and that's going to allow us to complete this project. But as I'll point out, there are a couple of little inconveniences that, well, they really bothered me, but there wasn't really much that I could do about them at this point. So we'll start by reapplying thermal paste to the heatsink in the 3 different locations, that's CPU, GPU, and chipset, and then we'll go ahead and start connecting everything. Now, as I said before, most of the connectors are in the same exact place, but there were a few times where I had to kind of stretch or manipulate a wire to make it reach. Don't ask me why Apple decided to move them around, I don't know. So with the logic board back in, our final step before we reassemble it completely is to rebuild the top case assembly. And this is where we uncover the biggest difference between the old and the new machine. On our old PowerBook, the trackpad and the keyboard have separate connections to the logic board, but on our new one, the keyboard connects directly to the trackpad, which goes all over one connection to the logic board. So we don't really need all that much from the old keyboard assembly because of those differences, but we do need the screws that hold it together. So we'll peel back the black anti-static tape, harvest those screws, and we'll install the keyboard into our new top case with those screws. Then we'll connect the keyboard ribbon cable and the backlight ZIF connector. And I know what you might be thinking at this point. What about that black anti-static tape to prevent the logic board from shorting out on the keyboard? Well, it just so happens that our new part came with the tape that goes on the keyboard. Look at that. It's still got the adhesive backing and everything. Once we screw it together, you just peel that backing off and we can apply the anti-static tape brand new to our fully reassembled keyboard. I mean, come on, that is so freaking cool. We are really going through the full refurbishment process for this old PowerBook. Incredible. I gotta say, this is fast becoming one of my favorite projects that I've worked on recently. We now have our reassembled, refurbished bottom case, we have a display assembly, and we have our top case. So now we get to the really fun part, which is taking our major components, putting them back together, and getting effectively a refurbished brand new PowerBook G4. And after installing the RAM, we have our finishing touch on this masterpiece, a brand new RAM access cover. All right, here comes the usual moment of truth where we see if everything works as it should. And there we go, a refurbished PowerBook G4. Now I'm gonna go ahead and tidy up and I'll be back in just a moment. So this is definitely not something you would see every day. A 20-year-old PowerBook that is, externally at least, brand new. This thing looks absolutely incredible. It's hard to believe that this laptop design is 20 years old. It really doesn't look that old, especially in this absolutely immaculate condition. It really does feel like a time capsule, like I'm transported back to 2004 and I'm seeing this computer for the first time. I've got the old parts here for comparison, and honestly, they're not terrible, but when you look at them next to a brand new PowerBook, the little details really stand out. It's stuff like the keys. Look at how bright and perfect they are. There's no wear from people typing on them for hundreds of hours. The trackpad is completely uniform. It doesn't have that smooth, worn center that these older laptops tended to develop. Even little things like the feel of the trackpad click and the sound that it makes. Isn't that so pleasant? So while this technically isn't a brand new PowerBook, because the internal components like the logic board and the LCD, those are original, but these external parts, the stuff that really matters when you look at the condition of a machine, it's perfect. I had a ton of fun working on this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed as well. This was actually my first time working on one of these G4 PowerBooks. I've never even owned one of these, so it was really cool to not only buy one for the first time, but restore it to brand new condition. So a big thanks to you guys for watching this video. As usual, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what your favorite part of this build was, and with that, I will see you in the next one.